Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something super exciting. We're going to completely unpack the elite athlete's blueprint. We're talking about the real, hard sports science behind true athletic performance, resilience, and longevity. Seriously, we're going to look at what exactly separates those truly functional, high-performing bodies from the ones that are, well, just built for show. Let's get right into it.
Now, I want to start off by throwing a pretty provocative question your way. Are you training to look fit or to actually be fit? Think about it. For decades, everyday gym culture has pushed this idea that a bodybuilder's physique is the absolute peak of human functional fitness. But as you'll see, the actual science of athletic performance tells a very, very different story. Okay, let's dive into this comparison. When you look at standard bodybuilding training, the focus is incredibly aesthetic, right? It's all about isolating single muscles, strapping into highly stable machines, and relying on slow reps with maximum time under tension just to pump up that muscle mass. But athlete training? That's a totally different beast. Elite athletes focus on compound movements, unstable free weights, and generating explosive speed and power. They don't just want the engine to look big, they need that engine firing on all cylinders. So here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with looking fit versus being fit. Then we'll look at training movements, not muscles. Third, we'll dive into the mind and nervous system. Fourth, the science of recovery. And finally, we'll wrap up by actually building the athlete blueprint.
All right, Section 1. Looking fit versus being fit. Preparing for life.
Now, don't get me wrong, bodybuilders are incredibly strong, but look closely at how they actually achieve that strength. They prioritize highly stable environments, seated exercises or those locked-in, heavy guided machines. They use extreme ranges of motion just to stretch the muscle for hypertrophy. They do those agonizingly slow reps, and they spend a ton of time on isolated core training. Think hundreds of crunches just to pop those superficial abs. But here's the catch. Isolating muscles like this doesn't teach them how to work together. When you step off a machine and onto a field, or hey, even if you just slip on an icy sidewalk, your muscles absolutely need to fire as a coordinated team.
Moving right along to Section 2, training movements, not muscles. This is all about building dynamic power.
A really prime example of training the movement is Olympic lifting, things like the snatch or the clean and jerk. Athletes use these massive compound movements because they force the entire body to act as a single cohesive unit. You are literally generating maximum force and minimum time all the way from your feet through to your fingertips. And the benefits? They're absolutely astounding. Research shows that integrating these lifts dramatically improves your neuromuscular control. To put that in perspective, for female college athletes, mastering the coordination required for Olympic lifts significantly reduces the risk of those devastating ACL injuries. So it's clearly not just about raw strength, it's about bulletproofing the entire body.
10,000. Take a second to let that number sink in. According to sports science research, that is the absolute minimum number of hours, which is roughly 10 years of dedicated grinding practice, that it takes for even highly talented athletes to reach true sporting excellence. 10,000 hours. It just goes to show there are literally zero shortcuts when it comes to building this kind of deep neurological and physical foundation.
Let's hit Section 3, the mind and nervous system. These are your hidden performance keys.
Before the body can even execute a movement, the mind has to engage. Elite athletes rely heavily on sheer mental toughness, which researchers often break down using the 4 C's model. That's confidence, control, commitment, and challenge. Psychological skills training, which they actually measure using sophisticated tools like the Mental Toughness Questionnaire, is very frequently the exact thing that separates the merely good athletes from the truly great ones when they're under immense high-stakes pressure.
And this brilliantly illustrates a major hidden threat we need to talk about: central nervous system, or CNS fatigue. Think of it like this: your mind and your body are connected by a massive superhighway, and sometimes that highway gets a major traffic jam. CNS fatigue is an invisible threat. It's a systemic decline in your brain and spinal cord's abilities to actually fire up and activate your motor units. It can completely ruin your performance, even on days when your physical muscles don't feel sore at all. Crazy, right?
Because it's entirely invisible, you really have to know what to look for. The sneaky symptoms of CNS fatigue include delayed reaction times, sudden poor coordination, or tasks that usually feel like a breeze suddenly requiring a much higher perceived effort. You might also see uncharacteristic technical breakdowns in form or just a general mental fog. This usually creeps in due to high-volume training, chronic stress, or missing out on sleep. It is literally a breakdown of the mind-muscle connection, so your muscles are willing, but the signal coming from the brain is just incredibly weak.
Okay, Section 4, the science of recovery. How to bounce back faster.
Let's look at the actual data here. Hydrotherapy ranks incredibly high, especially when we're talking about endurance and high-intensity recovery. Then you have active recovery, like a light jog or an easy swim. That ranks as moderate, but it is fantastic for clearing out blood lactate if you do it at just the right intensity. Now, interestingly, massage actually has a surprisingly low effect on restoring raw physical performance, though to be fair, it is great for psychological relaxation. And static stretching? Well, the research shows it actually has very mixed, minimal effects on performance recovery. Who knew?
So if you want to use the absolute most effective tool, hydrotherapy, you've got to get the science right. The optimal science-backed protocol for cold water immersion is a temperature of exactly 10 to 15 degrees Celsius for 14 to 15 minutes. Alternatively, a lot of athletes use contrast water therapy. That's alternating hot and cold water in a strict 1-to-1 ratio, usually 1 minute of each for about 7 rotations. That right there is the exact formula the pros use to shock their system entirely back to baseline.
But listen, recovery only works if your overall training volume is actually balanced. Bill Sweetenham, the former British swimming national performance director, describes this trap that so many people fall into. He calls it the twilight zone. He says, this is the twilight zone, too much volume to be fun and not enough to achieve competitive results. It perfectly highlights how a poor training-to-competition ratio will cause athletes to just completely plateau.
Finally, Section 5, Building the Athlete Blueprint, a framework for progress.
So, the crucial point is that sports scientists have mapped all of this out into the long-term athlete development framework. It charts athletic progress right from childhood straight through to adulthood. It kicks off at the fundamental stage, building basic movement literacy like agility and balance. Then it scales up into building specific techniques, constructing a massive aerobic engine during the training-to-train phase, and ultimately optimizing and maximizing everything for competition. A massive takeaway here is that an athlete's biological age, their actual physical maturation, should be what dictates their training style, not just the number of candles on their birthday cake.
And frameworks like this aren't just theoretical fluff. They are utilized by massive national organizations, like the Amateur Swimming Association in Britain, to actively structure the progress of thousands of real athletes. Following this ensures that those critical, fleeting windows of accelerated adaptation in youth are fully utilized, which creates an entire pipeline of highly resilient, optimized competitors.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that this concept isn't just limited to young Olympic hopefuls. It all traces back to general physical preparation, or GPP, a brilliant concept popularized by Soviet sports scientist Professor Yuri Verkhoshansky. The principle itself is beautiful in its absolute simplicity. Building a broad, comprehensive foundation of fitness supports both peak performance and lifelong longevity, literally no matter who you are.
So how do we achieve that general physical preparation? We can use the SAPS framework. Step 1 is strength. That's your absolute foundation that prevents injuries and builds muscle. Step 2 is agility, training your nervous system to move efficiently and keep your balance. Step 3 is power, the ability to generate quick force, which, by the way, becomes incredibly critical as we age to help prevent falls. And finally, Step 4 is speed, developing those cardiovascular energy systems. Together, these 4 pillars create a resilient, totally bulletproof body for professional athletes and everyday folks alike.
Because ultimately, for most of us, practice equals life. You absolutely don't have to be a professional athlete to benefit from high-level sports science. Your competition doesn't have to be the Olympic Games. It might just be having the stamina to run around playing with your grandkids, the agility to completely dominate your weekend softball league, or the endurance to crush a grueling family hike without waking up hurt the next day. Training like an athlete really just means preparing your body to handle the demands of whatever it is you absolutely love doing.
So let's wrap up with a thought for you to reflect on. Take a hard look at your own routine. Is your current workout truly preparing you for the sport of life, giving you the power, the resilience, and the nervous system health to actually thrive? Or is it just preparing you to look good in the mirror? The science is super clear on this. Train the movement, respect your nervous system, recover optimally, and build a body that's ready for absolutely anything. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.